Hello students, this week we are looking at a number of things within chapter 6 and the course content, but primarily our theme for the week, or what the text kind of leads us to look at, is social inequality and media representation. So when you look at the learning activities this week, you'll see that we'll be looking at really kind of if there is equality in media representation and how media represents different classes, races, ethnicities, genders, and such. So as we are looking through this, we need to know that the overview really tells us and kind of sets up what we're looking at. We're looking at media and representation of the social world, as well as media inclusion, roles, and control. The chapter is going to discuss a lot of things that deal with race, gender, and class in media, as well as our TED Talks. Our TED Talks really kind of dive in there and tell us how the news can often distort media, or how the media distorts the news, vice versa, as well as how gender is sort of being lost within social media and things. So our TED Talks are designed to kind of enhance our learning based off of what we are reading about within the chapters. Our assignments this week will also help us focus on looking at social constructionism theory. We've talked about this a lot, the social construction of reality. It's been an underwoven theme within our course thus far. And this week we're writing a paper on it, and we'll be discussing how to do that towards the end of this lecture. But most importantly, it's important to know that social constructionism, how we socially construct our reality and what we portray or believe our reality to be from those objects that help us socially construct it, have a profound influence on media representation or social representation and a representation of equality within media. So it's really, really important to keep that in mind. We will be completing a news review number 3 and reflection number 6 in addition to our paper. So do get started early. News review number 3 asks you to look at a date that's really important to you within time, like your birthday, anniversary, things of that nature, and look at the primetime television schedule for that day and start to answer some questions along those lines that help us start to see the representation of social classes and things of that nature within media and how perceptions may have changed throughout time. And then reflection number 6 asks you to determine if you think media portrayals are realistic and why they may be realistic. When we're looking at media portrayals, we're meeting portrayals in media of various different genders, social class, family life, race, people's socioeconomic status, the amount of money they make, things of that nature. So when you look at a movie, do you think that they're portraying women accurately? Do you think they're stereotyping athletic men? Do you think they're stereotyping athletic women? And so on and so forth. And that's what that reflection is designed for you to look at. So here's some key questions that are our theme for the week. Do media represent the world accurately? How do social inequalities in terms of race, gender, and class translate to potential media images? And what are common stereotypes of certain race, gender, class, and media? And where do we think those stereotypes come from? So be thinking of that as we move through the course content. In addition, be thinking about the Christian worldview perspective here. So as Christians, and as we go moving through this and looking through this, what does that mean to be more Christianly, or to think Christianly, as we not just consume media, but eventually move into being media content creators? We begin to create media and such. So if we're thinking Christianly, how can we represent the world accurately as a Christian media producer? Or how can we fight against potential social inequalities while still holding true to our values of Christian worldview perspective and such? So keep that in mind as we move through this week's content. I'm going to highlight some things from the text and some things that you do need to get out of the TED Talks that we'll be watching. Issues in media representation really kind of helps us to look at and begin to dive deeper into this idea that media representations are not always reality. We know this. Most of us know this. Most of us that are media savvy or become more and more media literate, more and more literate with media as we move through our adulthood and such, know that media representations are not reality. Albert Bandura reminds us that through social learning theory that we tend to learn through social environments. So for children and adolescents and those that maybe don't have a lot of exposure to media, so underdeveloped worlds and things like that, if you think back to the Bhutan documentary and such, can oftentimes begin to learn from media and begin to portray media as reality. Social learning theory tells us we learn by observation, we learn through watching or reflecting on things that we may have seen in our lives, so we develop behaviors based off of that. And so media plays a significant role in that. And so it's very important to know that as we do know media representations are not reality, it's important to know that sometimes they can be depicted or thought of as reality to those that maybe are not media literate. Media often times does not try to reflect the real world. They try to portray what they feel the world should be, or they try to portray the world through entertainment. And so the reflection of the world is maybe distorted through a comedic lens, or through a satirical lens, or through a dramatic lens, or whatever that may be. And also, there is ambiguity in defining what is real. Remember, if we're looking at the social construction of reality, that tells us, Berger and Luckman tells us, that reality is socially constructed based off of observations and based off of what has been communicated to us in a number of ways, visually, verbally, non-verbally, whatever it may be. So my portrayal and my projection of what I believe is real may not be what you think is real. And it's really important to understand that. That's why we are writing the social construction paper this week, in the week that we're looking at social inequality. So my favorite TV show may project reality to me, or what I think is real, but may not to you. And so it's important to do that. And that's why you'll see that there is a variety in entertainment shows on television and media, and there's a variety of what we can do with that. So it's very important to keep that in mind. We also need to know that mainstream media historically has reproduced social inequalities based on race, gender, and social sexual orientations a number of times throughout history, and to keep that in mind. But more importantly is to look at the idea is if we think media firms have the obligation to reflect reality, and then if we do that, we open up this Pandora's box of defining of what is reality. So it's just, those are some things to keep in mind as we look at issues according to the text of what media representation contains. Next, we need to look at different ways we may be looking at the significance of media content. So we'll look at media content in 6 different ways. And what that means is what we produce is media content. So we have an idea of something we want to portray through media that ends up being content. We need to look at it from the reflection of the producers. What was the goal for the producers in mind? What did they want us to get out of this? We need to look at media content as a reflection of the audience preference. So media is being created to the preference of the audience. I like to watch comedic films, so I may watch a film that's a comedy, and that's going to be my audience preference. So there may be content developed as a reflection to my preference. It may have a lot of jokes or things of that nature. Sometimes content is recreated or is created to be a reflection of society in general. So the creator wants you to look at this as a depiction of what they feel society is, if that's accurate or not. Sometimes media content is created as an influence on audiences. So this usually is in the form of documentaries and things of that nature. They want to enhance our thinking on something and help us to think differently about it. Sometimes content is defined as or reflected upon as a self-enclosed text. That's where the producer has something that they want to describe to the audience in an enclosed environment. That's a text, some type of text they want us to get across, and more of a self-reflection, more autobiographical and things of that nature. And then the last one is to study content that is mostly commonly used in media analysis. And so what we'll do is that's really kind of wrapping up the 5. We're looking at media as a reflection of the producer, either the audience preference, society in general, influence on audience, or a self-enclosed text, some kind of biographical, autobiographical pick or depiction in media for that. And so once we understand that we're looking at the significance of media content from one of those perspectives, it helps us to be more analytical in our media analyses. And we can bring things in like social learning theory from Bandura or social constructionism and things of that nature to understand how that may be of use in analyzing media influence or the portrayal of what we call the real world or reality within media. This leads us to look at our social constructionism paper. This paper is due this week. It's something we've been kind of building upon the entire semester. We have not had anything formally due, so you have not missed out on that, but we've been the content thus far has been helping us build upon writing a paper like this. So while using the idea of social constructionism theory from Berger and Luckman, you're going to write a paper that's 500 to 700 words. That word count does not include your reference page, does not include your cover page or your abstract or anything like that. This is to be used in full APA format, so it's very important that you keep that in mind. The word count is only for the content of the paper. There are 3 things that you will be analyzing within this paper, but it's important to know that in addition to those 3 questions, you do need to have and use at least 3 scholarly sources and 3 popular sources within your paper. And so to clearly define what that is, a scholarly source is an academic source. That's something you're not going to get on Wikipedia or things like that. And a popular source would be a media source, something like something you've read on a blog, something you've read about social media, something that like a movie, if you want to reference a movie to talk about how it talks about the reality of life and things of that nature, you can. But popular sources tend to be more pop culture related to help enhance what your points are within this persuasive paper. And then the scholarly sources are the academic side, helping us beef it up what you would traditionally put in a paper. So you're first going to introduce the theory. Tell me what you think this theory is, what it purports, what the major arguments are, and such, pretending as if I do not know already. 2, you're going to choose a media example, so that's part of your popular sources, and apply it to the theory. So you have to have 3 things that support number 2. That's where your popular sources are going to come in. How would you use this theory to explain what is happening? What can we learn from this media example? What is this media example telling us about how we may socially construct our reality? And then 3, apply the theory to your life and media consumption. What do you learn about yourself and greater society as a result of researching this theory? And what does God's word have to say about this? Now, this question sometimes students get hung up on. I'm not particularly looking for a scripture reference or anything like that. You can, if that's what you feel you're led to do in that question. I'm asking you, if we're thinking Christianly or from a Christian perspective, what does God have to say, or what does that Christian perspective have to tell us about what we've learned about social constructionism? So what do you think from a Christian perspective social constructionism has to do with what you've learned and things of that nature? And so it's up to you on how you want to answer that question. I just want you to know that you're not limited to just finding a scripture that you think is relevant. That's not the point of the question, although you can choose to do that. It's really more of a reflection on what you think the worldview is and how Christianity comes into this theory, and how as Christians we can use this theory maybe to help us help people socially construct reality or shape what reality may be. And so that's it. That's what we're working on this week. If you have any questions, let me know. You all have been doing great. I have went through all of your midterms by now, and everybody is moving forward well. If you have any questions, do not hesitate to contact me. Remember, do not forget to be working on your capstone. Those interviews will be coming up more quickly than you think. And have a blessed week. Thank you.